welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man, and I'm Michael Lyons.
Mm-hmm. I'm Margaret.
That's it?
That's it.
That's it.
That's all you get.
That's all we get. We're a little under the weather, folks.
Yeah.
Everyone's sick.
Well, just the strange weather pattern, I think, is what's doing it.
Right, and the aliens.
Okay.
They're everywhere.
Yes.
I saw them on the news. Well, we are a little bit under the weather, but I think we're going to power on through because we're not ready yet to have our names written in the Book of Life.
Oh my. What do you mean?
I'm not sure what I mean.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? Well, that's good. Let's start there. What do I mean? We're going to talk tonight a little bit about the Book of Life, and maybe we'll start with a definition. So I will go to our definition person. Could you define the Book of Life for the listening audience?
All right. It is held that the existence here is transitory, and there is a life that can be lived eternally, a never-ending life. This world, birth and death, birth and death, goes roundy round. Some religions or philosophies believe that the soul is reiterating, but every soul is unique. So that's a whole nother discussion. But the belief that you can live eternally, which is a pursuit that has been done by many civilizations, looking for like the elixir of life that will allow you to live forever or keep you forever young. But the phrase, the Book of Life, that is in the Bible. And what that is that your name is put into the Book of Life. And if your name is found in the Book of Life, you get to live forever. Now, if your name is not found in the Book of Life, then the life you've had on earth is it. That's it for you. That's all you get. But since this world is a world that contains evil, it's a fallen world. When you die and your name is not written in the Book of Life, you are to be judged by your actions and how you lived, on whether you go to hell or, I don't know, some traditions say purgatory. It goes on and on. Man has been struggling with the concept of where you go after death for a long time. But we are discussing Book of Life. So the idea is that your name must be in that book for you to take steps into an eternal life in heaven where evil doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, that was sort of I thought we were going to go more with the tradition, but the Book of Life does appear in the Bible, and it is exactly as you say. It's sort of a figurative ledger of those who are belonging to, the if you will, the cohort of the Lord, or the cohort of the Lamb, as they say. And I think it has a lot of tie back through the book of Daniel and through Revelation and a few other places where the names that are written to the book of life, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, these are also, at the last trump, that whole thing in book of Revelation. So it has a apocryphal and sort of a revelatory angle to it. The book of life is in essence a book of those who have been judged to be among the cohort of the Lord, and then you can have your name taken out of the book of life. So that's the context of this. But I think you came up with a much better sort of twist on the whole thing. Wait, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's not a twist. It's, when you think of it, the way you get into the book of life is that there seems to be a couple of different ways of looking at it, perspective. Traditionally, you take Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And you get written into the Lamb's Book of Life. That's the phrase that what branch of Christianity uses that? And the whole concept of taking Jesus as your Lord and Savior, meaning that there's a connection or a relationship that you have with Him. And as in any relationship, it must develop. But once you live with that relationship, what?
Go ahead.
You're giving me some strange... What is it? Say it.
Oh, because the book of life is Old Testament.
The Lamb's Book of Life is...
Well, the concept of the book of life is Judaic tradition, and maybe it's also used in Christian, but it definitely develops out of the Judaic tradition. Okay, well then you can speak from the Judaic tradition then. Well, I mean that's where it comes from. It's really from it's the book of life is coming out of the Judaic tradition, and then of course it translates into the Christian tradition. But yeah, it's not just. It really is the cohort of the Lord, and then the Lamb's Book of Life is the let's say the evolution of it, if you will. So in the do you know how that Jewish tradition had held it then? In other words, how did they present it? Yeah, as far as I know, your name is written in the Book of Life, and then you'll be among the ones who are raised on the last day. But how do you get written in that? You have to. Well, you see, this is the key, and I think it's not going astray. But if you go back, it was you came into the Book of Life through following the law, and then if you go through the Christian evolution out of the Judaic basis of that, was that the law was fulfilled, and then you become the Lamb's Book of Life. That's how it turned in one from the other, I believe. Well, I know in the Judaic tradition you had to sacrifice a lamb to cover for the year. Or other sacrifices, but yes. Yes, it was a blood sacrifice. Yep. And that allows your name to be written in the Lamb's Book of Life, according to the Judaic. I think it's more than just that, but that's among the things that you're doing to preserve your place, if you will. To keep yourself on the good side of keep your name in the Book of Life. You had to follow the law. You had to right. You had to fulfill the law, fulfill the precepts of the law. Exactly. So, in the Hebrew tradition, I know that you had to keep all of the law. Correct. And if you kept all of the law, then were you written in the Book of Life? Well, or as you mentioned, the whole idea of atonement and sacrifice, and and Yom Kippur, the whole that whole.
Okay.
But I mean, I think that's just the basis of it, if you will. And I still like the fact that that's, if we start there with as you mentioned, many traditions, the Book of Life. You find a similar, an echo of that in the Egyptian tradition too. In essence, the idea that your name would be written into the Book of Life if you were pure enough to go into the afterlife. That's a sort of an Egyptian. It's not called exactly that. It was some other type of.
No, they were weighing your heart, I thought.
Right, but there was also, I think there was a book there too. I don't want to get deeply into the details because I'm not sure exactly either. I think either there was a scroll. There was a scroll of life, I believe, in the Egyptian tradition. But in any case, we're getting bogged down in a little bit in the details. I liked your take on the whole thing.
Well, as I understood it,
yes.
Jesus had fulfilled all of it for us. He fulfilled all the laws for us. He was the only one that could do it. And because of that, you claim him as your Savior to help you be written. Then you can be written into the Lamb's Book of Life. He fulfills all the laws. He's your Savior. And your name, since he is your Savior, and you are in relationship with him as one of his, your name gets written in the Lamb's Book of Life.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not saying it's any different from that, but your take on that, which was the interesting part of this. At the beginning, is we define where people have come with this concept of the Book of Life, and sort of it. We can also talk a little bit about our quote that you're written in, and it's almost like you're put in permanently, permanent ink in the Book of Life. And I liked your take on the whole thing. That's what I wanted to get around to. If you want to go there.
Oh.
So we're kind of stumbling around a little bit. I think we're both under the weather.
I know I'm under the weather, people. I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay. We're going to power on through. But the idea is this tradition, which comes out of both the Judeo-Christian tradition and into the popular zeitgeist, if you will, is sort of it's like black and white. You're in or you're out. Either you're fulfilling the law, or you're cast into the darkness, or you either you affirm and you're saved, or you're not. And it's sort of a yes or no kind of gate sort of thing. And what Margaret had talked about last week, it was actually an outcome of one part of our last week's show, if you will, was that the writing of your name in the Book of Life was more of how is it written into the Book of Life? How does it get there? And
well, yeah, no, that was the question. How is your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life?
Right.
And it's more than just because most people believe that, well, there's a Christian grouping that feels that you take Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you declare it, now your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. That means they take that as a get out of jail card and say, well, then I can live any way I want because now I'm saved.
Right. And you even hear sort of an abuse of not abuse, but sort of a misunderstanding of what in the tradition of Catholics anyway. There's something called confession, and it's sort of a misunderstanding to say, well, now I can do anything I want, and as long as I go to confession.
As long as I go to confession, I can go sin again.
Right.
Right.
It's like you put a nickel in the slot and you get a gumball. And it's a very simplistic.
It's a very human. I got to get around this rule.
Very, very human, and it's so easy, to, in essence. There was, it reminds me also of the ancient. I'm not sure if it was a heresy, but certainly it was a sort of a misunderstanding. The ancient practice of buying an indulgence, Now, in indulgence, the word indulgence, people have come to mean that you
chocolate.
Right, chocolate.
It means
okay.
chocolate.
It means chocolate, or it just means that you're indulging yourself. You're pleasing yourself. You're devoting yourself to some hedonistic sort of pleasure. But an indulgence in this context is in the same way that you indulge a child. You say, well, this child's misbehaving, but I'm not going to punish them because they're so cute and da-da-da. So I'll just tolerate it, and I'll pat them on the head, and give them a cookie or a gumball anyway. Well,
a little mercy.
A little mercy, and to some extent, it's a mercy provided in lieu of actual deserving. You're not deserving of the mercy. It's just sort of expected that I'm so cute, so therefore you're going to let me get away with murder. So the purchasing of an indulgence was sort of like that. You would go and give money to somebody, and they would give you this get out of jail free card, so then you could sort of get your I've paid my sin tax. There's a modern day equivalent, which is another interesting thing, which is like carbon offset credits, which is basically like buying an indulgence against the carbon green religion, if you will.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of it that way,
Right.
But that's exactly the same mechanism.
It's human all the way through,
human
through the centuries. So getting your name written in the Book of Life, or getting yourself an indulgence, or the misunderstanding of saying, well, I can sin all I want, I just have to go to confession, and I'm all good, is part of this. It's sort of all sort of written around this. And what your twist on it, what I came to understand as your twist on it, was that your name is, you have to, you do have to give something of yourself to get your name written into, quote unquote, the Book of Life. You have some volition, you have some sacrifice. You have to take some sort of let's say a vow or a make some sort of a commitment. And then let's say you do that, and you feel assured that now I am one of the cohort. I have become, I've taken, let's say, as you mentioned, let's say you've taken Christ as your Savior or whatever. However, it's sort of a simplistic and maybe even a grave misunderstanding to say, well, then I'm done. Now I can be the unconscious. I can be whatever type of rotter I want to be, because I've already paid my dues. I've got my ticket, and I don't have to worry about anything anymore. And in fact, that misunderstanding and the method by which you are kind of writing your name into the Book of Life is an active thing. It is a being thing. It is not a static thing. You can't just punch your ticket and say, well, now I'm done, because that would be equivalent to saying that I've had one good meal and now I never have to eat again, or I've done one good deed and I never have to do anything good again. You're not allowed, or it's not allowed, but
superficial.
It's superficial, and it's also in many ways I'm searching for the word, but it's a denial of the actual active portion of your life to say that you can somehow make an atonement. And this is sort of, if you will, go back to the Jewish tradition, this idea that you make one big sacrifice and everything's done. That's not how it works. Exactly, for the year. It's not really how it works, and you can see why people like this, because it's like, well, now I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And
I'm clear for the year.
I'm clear for the year. I'm clear forever. And in fact, it's much more like what we've talked about many in other shows in the past. It's much more like the idea of Tecumseh, this idea that at the end of your life, you have a song to sing, or you have a life to bring. You have a story, and that story And it's sort of like the Egyptian way, is weighed at the end. You have to see, not that your name was written in the Book of Life, but that you were able to keep it there, if you will.
Well, the question rose in my mind because there are moments when you're in a situation or an experience, you're having an experience, and it feels like forever. It feels like you're so clear and your perception go onward. The clarity is just so crisp that you absolutely record the moment, everything about that moment, instantaneously. It's almost like a thunderbolt hits you. And you see everything and record everything in that moment. And you can go back and relive it by remembering it. And I always wondered about those moments, because you don't have those moments all the time. Those are few and far between. As a small child, I just do remember that. It's like the first time you may have tasted like a favorite candy that you might have now. You remember everything about it. Who gave it to you, where you were. Were you sitting at a table? Was it for a birthday, etc.? It just, all these memories come in, and you just remember it crisply. The thing that we talk about here is having those eternal moments. Like you hug, first time you really hugged your mother or your child, the first time your child was set on your chest.
Birth of your child, exactly.
And that is a memory that goes so crisp, so clear. Those are eternal moments, because the love that's there, and believe me, it takes a lot of love to birth a baby. A lot of love. When the baby's finally there, and after everything you've gone through, and you get to hold this little life, and it tries to open its eyes to look at you. It's just lying on your chest. It can't hold itself up. All that, and the smell of the newborn baby, the soft touch, the warmth, the relief.
Right, the relief.
An eternal moment, because the foundation of it was the love, that beginning of a loving relationship. That baby now is no longer part of you. You are two separate bodies, and you can begin to interact with one another. So, clarity of those moments, I had always called them moments that you put into an eternity bank, where you just remember that will always be remembered. But the other day I was thinking, wait a minute, maybe that's what they mean by being written in the Lamb's Book of Life, because the Lamb's Book of Life represents you in eternity. But you in eternity means all your experiences that you bring with you. So that was like, is that's the question. Is that how you become written in the Lamb's Book of Life? Having series of eternal moments that get taken down by somebody, an angel, a infinite being writes down in an infinite book your infinite moment. That seems to make sense to me.
It's a beautiful image. I wanted to go back though. The key, I think, and I really do think this is it, because you mentioned that love is sort of the basis of these eternal moments. And people throw the word around all the time. Love is used in all kinds of contexts, love pizza and whatever not. But what you just said, we often talk about sort of an unequivocal love, a love without any judgments, without any reservations. Sort of an unattainable thing, and it has a parallel in physics, if you will. It has a parallel in the universe, if you will, in the sense that the unattainability of the moment of now, or the unattainability of the actual quantum state of something, has those sorts of parallel aspects. And so the gate to eternity, or the gate to this eternal moment, appears to be through this sort of this unequivocal love, and you can reach that through a couple different modes. You mentioned, childbirth there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice. There's a tremendous amount of effort. There's a tremendous amount of commitment. There's an honor. There's a singular purpose. There's life and death tend to be on the line in these eternal moments. The experiences are unique in some way. Billions of people are born and billions of people die, but each one is a unique experience. So they have a sort of a soul echo. You mentioned earlier about the fact that souls, incarnations, are unique, but each incarnation and the experiences of that incarnation, the unique ones, or rather the eternal ones, the ones that echo, the ones that get written down by somebody, and we'll talk about who writes them down perhaps, but the ones that echo appear to have a sort of a timelessness to them, or a now, an eternal moment of now, and this is sort of a dichotomy too, wouldn't you say? We talk about now being this sort of, this is it right now, but eternity seems to have, it's infinite. Those two things are not without parallels. The moment of now is infinitely small, and eternity is infinitely large. The connection between those two, the intersection of between those two, is where existence happens. And when you are in your being state, when you're in true unequivocal love, non-judgmental, there's another word I'm
unconditional.
Unconditional. There we go. I kept on going around it and around it. When you're truly in the state of an unconditional love, it's the gateway to that eternal moment. And so, as a child, your eternal moments, these crystalline memories, which when you go back to them, you don't just remember them. You remember lots of things. You remember your fourth grade math teacher. You remember whatever, going to the beach. But these crystalline memories come back with like full experiential, who was there, what was said, how you felt, what day it was, what color the grass was, what color, how the sun came in. Every portion of that in a 3D experiential moment comes back to you, and they can be triggered by various things. But when they are triggered, you're not just remembering it, you're re-experiencing it. A piece of your existence, your experiential soul, is there at some point. So that's been recorded in a more than just mundane way. It isn't just a note in a notebook. It's truly a moment of now which has an eternal quality, and you could think of it as being written in the book of life, and it's being written in the book of your life. It's more than just even your name, but it is attached to you uniquely and in a very intimate way. Well,
it's interesting because your name in that context takes on a whole new meaning. Your name is the sum total of how you've lived your life. And if you've lived your life in those eternal moments, because names in general have a lot of weight and meaning to it, depending upon what you've done and how you've done it, decisions you've made. It used to be that your name was everything. It was your reputation. It was your honor. And in this society, it's sort of gone in a whole bunch of different ways, where people basically are saying, well, I'm going to tell you how to address me. And you're like, the interaction between you and the other is vital for the expression of unconditional love. You can't express unconditional love all by yourself.
That's interesting. No, I mean, it sounds funny when you say it that way, but I think that's very interesting, is that unconditional love requires another.
It's a being state. And you can accept yourself unconditionally.
True.
But can you love yourself unconditionally?
Maybe.
It just seems that you're separating yourself into pieces so that this piece can love the other piece, instead of understanding that love is a being state and it's a full incorporation of who you are. So the full acceptance of who you are would be your baseline to start with.
Yeah. I think this is very good. We should just dwell on it for a second. When you say love yourself unconditionally, you part of that is that you are one being, and you have actually identified with the being of yourself as love. So when you say you love yourself, you've torn yourself into two, because it's you and the one who you love, which is also you. And that sounds much more narcissistic. But in truth, to love unconditionally, you first have to be a whole being.
Right.
And then in being the whole being, you have your whole self to give, your whole self to love with, and to be, and to, again, the language is terrible, but to exist in that unconditional, timeless state of love. But then you do look for the other. And this reminds me, this is the parallel of why create the universe, why create other beings in the universe if you're God and you're already completely one in oneself. Because without the other, love, even of a unique and perfect being, is unrequited. It's purposeless. And so the being state is fulfilled in having the other being, because this whole idea of unity and duality, the creation of a universe and of other beings within it, so that love can be exchanged among those beings in a timeless state, is a fulfillment of your being state. The unitary being is a null; it's a void. Remember, we talked earlier about the universe without choice is just a null void. You have to have choice in order to make it into a universe. I would say that the being all by itself is sort of a null and void thing. It's fulfilled in the other. And I very much liked, the other thing I wrote down here is that your name, your name is, everyone's named John or whatever. That's not the name. The name is your unique vibration. It is your energy. It is your spark of source. Yes, we're all one in source, and we're all beings within that one being, if you will. We're all pieces of that one being. But in the uniqueness, that's your name, that's your vibration, that's your one note in the song of the universe, if you will. And all the things that when you realize in your being state, in the unconditional state of fulfilling yourself in love to an other, that's when you write. That's the part that gets written down. That's where your name, your vibrational state, your uniqueness makes a mark. And it's this suffers from analogy, but the mark is made upon yourself in regard. You carry your own book of life around with you. It is of your being, of your essence, of your vibration. It is uniquely you, as you change experientially, but yet remain who you are. It's a beautiful duality. You are who you are, and you change in experience, but you remain who you are. It's like saying, I feel the same as I did when I was 12 years old. I act the same sometimes. But yes, the being is the same, even though the experiential part of you changes, and yet you are the same being with these new experiences. That is your book of life. You are your own book in one regard.
Well, you do create your own story, and it can be put together in a book. But whether that book is something that is eternal is a question. And suppose if you just want to do a transient thing, in other words, you're just like a flower bud that blooms and then dies back, and that's all you want to do. I suppose you could do that as well. But it's your choice on how you wish to live your life. The fact that humans have been searching for thousands of years for a way to live forever is part of it. Although I think it was it your grandmother who said, there is you can get to a point where you're living too long. That's what I remember her saying.
Well, that's I want to go back to what you just said before, though. I think that's very profound.
Mm-hmm.
Your eternal moments, the pieces of you which you write upon, which are closest to experiential unconditional love, that become these crystalline memories, are written upon what? Where is the book of life? I believe that you carry around with you the book of life, and if you are writing your name on your book of life, you can write it as though it is the Lamb's book of life. You align your energy, you align your essence
mm-hmm.
through unconditional love to the other. You have to do two things in that, or maybe three, but you have to will it. You have to accept yourself as a being, realize your eternal, your own eternity, if you will, your own eternalness, your own connection to source, and then fulfill that in unconditionally loving the other. And that becomes these crystalline memories, and they are timeless. And you can see it in great art too. We've talked about that, where the love of the artist, which is also an unconditional love for the creation, for the mm-hmm. object, for the other, is so great that it becomes an eternal moment that then reflects the essence of the artist, the eternity of the artist, the eternal name, if you will, timelessly. You can look at, we pick any great artist, but Michelangelo always comes to mind. You can look at the work of a Michelangelo and feel the love, the eternity, the energy of that interaction, because it wasn't just Michelangelo's being, although that's certainly there, and it isn't just the stone and the beautiful marble or whatever, but it's the eternal moment of creation and the writing of that name in that book of life, that eternal moment. You see that you feel the same thing today, 500, 700, whatever it is years later, as was done in that moment. So that echoes through time, and it will continue to echo through time.
It speaks to the soul, which is also eternal.
Yes.
I think there's a thought. The language of the soul, if you're capable of interacting with that level of creativity, because when you're creative, you're actually loving what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
That's the foundation of the interaction, is that love of the moment. You're loving the moment as you are participating in the activity, whatever the activity is. So doing anything where you're loving the moment or creating something new or different, or just interacting with those that you have a deep relationship with, and it's unconditional, is the foundation of the Lamb's Book of Life. Maybe the best way to put it is that's the paper. You got to, in order to do that, you have to be able to meet that substance, to be able to make an imprint on that substance. If you cannot meet that frequency of substance, you will not be able to interact with that eternal flow of material.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I mean, you open the Book of Life with love.
Yes.
In other words, that's the gateway. It's also, in many ways, the pen.
Yes.
It could even be thought of as the ink. I mean, if we're going to stretch this analogy to the end, you cannot make an indelible mark upon eternity, upon the eternal pages, without being in the moment, opening the book with an unconditional love, writing. The act is the writing. It's like the word. And the word is an act of being, which brings creation. So you're acting through love, opening through love. So you open the channel through love. You're writing upon love. It's all of a piece.
It's an eternal substance.
It's an eternal substance. It has an eternity attached to it. So it has a moment of now, the moment of eternity, which is the moment of now. And to act upon it and to make an indelible eternal mark, you have to become the substance. You have to control and shape the substance, and you have to do it in the being state. So in alignment with, in the vibration of
right.
Source,
right.
of love. So that's why. Okay, bring this back a little bit off the lofty heights. That's why that crystalline memory of, for argument's sake, the birth of your child, can be brought back, and as though it was. People say, "Oh, it's like it was yesterday." No, it's like it's exactly now that you re-experience, because that isn't just a memory. That is written upon your soul in your vibration, using your hand, using the energy of unconditional love and the act, such that when it's triggered again, that brings you right back. It brings you, truly you, your being. And it's wrong to say back, because you're just in that moment again.
You're accessing it.
You're accessing it much better.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going back or forward. because that implies that it's somehow in the past or in the future. It's now. It becomes now again.
Right. They can access eternal moments.
Yes. And that's what it's all about. It's not only accessing them, of course, but creating them. The Egyptians saw that as sort of weighing your heart at the end of your life, at the end of your temporal existence, for this particular soul incarnation. All those unique, unconditional love moments where you are in being and acting in being and writing upon being with eternity in mind.
Okay, they had a whole different thing now. That had to do with the weight of your heart.
Yeah, not the same.
It's not the same.
I said they had an echo of it. They had an echo of it.
Okay, similarity.
Similarity.
They're not writing.
No. They took a completely not wrong take, but just sort of that was their
perception.
That was their perception, but in true being, your alignment with unconditional love allows you to accept, to modify, to create, to write, and later to access, to experience that moment. And the life with those moments is the real life, and all the other things in between, which are moments of now, could be as those, but usually aren't, unfortunately. Perhaps because we can't live on the unconditional love all the time here. It's too difficult. But yet when you do, it is immediately recognized and undeniable, that moment, and it gets written.
Well, living with unconditional love as a foundational thing.
Right.
You really have to get rid of your ego. I mean, your ego can't be involved at all.
I think it gets excluded.
Well, not excluded, but it is outside the bounds of ego, even though the ego is included in it. It's not excluded, but it's not the main focus of things.
Mm.
It's part. It finds its appropriate place when you walk in the eternal moment. And there's no exclusion involved, because then you would be rejecting
a piece of you.
Yeah. That's not what being in the state of unconditional love is about. It's understanding that the limitations are there, but it has its appropriate place.
That's very wise, because I think a lot of people, when they start this journey, Buddhists and many others, are trying to exclude the ego and to destroy the ego. In fact, even Tolle talks about,
or the body.
Or the body, denying the body.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, every piece of you, ego, mind, thoughts, emotions, everything, every part of you has to be accepted unconditionally as you. Your vibration, the whole thing is you. Your incarnation has to be completely accepted. You have to know who you are. Completely, all of it, and then you have to say, here I am. This is all of me. This is exactly who I am in this moment of now, and I choose. The will is also essential, not just involved, but essential.
Right.
I choose to engage all of my being in an act of unconditional love, to write upon through creation, to write upon through relationship with the other, on the eternal book, which is also me, because that experience then becomes uniquely, every experience is uniquely yours, but it becomes a unique point, an accessible gateway to the moment of now that happened at that moment.
Mm-hmm. And I go back to the concept, or the reality, that most of the universe is made up of space.
Nothing.
And matter is such a small part of it. But because we exist on the plane of matter, where matter surrounds us, we think it's everything. But if you think about it, we really are a very, very very small point of existence in the creation of the universe, this plane that we happen to be interacting on. And it reminds you of like a game board that you put out on the middle of a table so that everybody can participate. You know, okay, we're going to go all meet here and we're all going to play according to these rules. This is the board. We can interact this way. But in reality, it's space and energy. Matter is this very ridiculously small portion of what creation is. And you think of it and you're like, well, wait a minute. Why is it that way? And that goes back to, well, the eternal point, that experience that you've had where what you're doing is bringing the vastness of who you actually are down to this point of interaction so that you cannot actually say, I managed to manifest this love experience in this teeny tiny little piece of space-time matter. We're going to find out that exercise is probably going to be the hardest thing we have ever tried to do.
Well, I mean, the humorous is there certainly, but in truth, the matter that you're currently inhabiting is truly that. It's being inhabited. Incarnated is another way of saying it, by something which is eternal. And for this particular incarnation, you get the opportunity to have these experiences.
Right. If you just think about it for a second. That means that, you know, us little humans down here, we're the only ones really capable of living on this plane and actually interact with the eternal. Because most of the stuff around us is not interacting with the eternal.
No, yeah. And have the experiences. When you are incarnated, you are able to write upon, you know, to go back to our analogy, your book of life. I mean, it says the Lamb's book of life, but you are the Lamb.
Well, no, it's
in some regards.
I think of the Lamb's book of life as that eternal frequency. It's a high frequency.
Sure.
Each one of us has our own book, but can we meet up with that frequency to communicate with that, to transfer all the stuff that you've had on your screen, on your desk? Can you upload it to a place where it can be recorded eternally?
Yeah. Well, and the mechanism of doing that, though, is to become in alignment with that that higher, that eternal moment, that higher aspect of you, of your being. The distractions down here are the challenge, if you will.
Yes.
And the
nothing but.
And the illusion that we entertain down here, that matter is all things, right, is part of the distraction. The temporality of what we're doing here is also part of the distraction. It's why it doesn't last all that long. And you're given this time to have these experiences and to fight your way through all of this, basically, illusion and veils, and realign with that which is truly eternal.
If you can embrace the concept that no thing lasts forever, and no thing ever will.
Right. That's form as till it was something else.
Yes, and can you embrace that? Because we've all been taught to value the form, the material above everything else, not taking into account that there is other experiences, other situations that you can participate in. And most of us, yes, we live life. We enjoy ourselves. That's when you're closest to being able to create in your book, to really, truly live your life exploring not only the qualities of yourself and how you yourself function being down here, as well as the relationships that you form between you and other people, as well as the surroundings. Those interactions are the foundation. What is the foundation of your interaction? Are you going into this to figure out what you can get out of it? Or are you going into this to explore and see if you can have a real relationship, a back and forth, where both souls are able to share and grow? It's truly fascinating.
Yeah, and one thing we've ignored this whole show, and I'll just bring it in at the end here, is that we did have a nice quote, and the quote, I wanted to state it, and then I think we found a sort of a twist in it. So the quote was from somebody by the name of R.C. Sproul, and it says, "When God writes our names in the Lamb's Book of Life, he doesn't do it with an eraser handy. He does it for eternity." And I would say that the way that this could be better understood is that when you, in alignment with, aligning your energy with Source, aligning your energy as completely as you can, as unconditionally as you can with God, write in the Lamb's Book of Life, which is, again, you don't, if you're doing it correctly, there is no such thing as an eraser. You are writing an eternal thing. And that's why it's so powerful. When you write upon your soul in alignment with Source, it remains there. Mm-hmm. It is an eternal thing that has consequences for the universe, mm-hmm. for the universe of all things, which is, Source is greater than universe. Consciousness contains the whole thing. You write upon it in this way, and that's the powerful part of being in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing when you think of, well, where is my part in this? Because you have the free will to choose what your reaction is going to be to whatever situation you come upon. And checking the foundation of your choice. Are you making it out of fear? Using fear as your foundation? Are you doing it out of, let's say it's money. You want to make more money? Are you going to make a decision? That's your foundation? Are you going to make it out of curiosity? Creativity? That's the foundation of your next decision. Or is it love? Hopefully, it's love.
And if you do it out of love, it binds all those things together.
Well, it creates an experience that is added to the Book of Life. And I believe we've reached the end of our hour.
We'll have to write that down.
So, I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
Thank you for listening.